Welcome to r/malicious compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of a request. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. The first story. My commander wanted to call my parents back and complain about me, but he forgot that I was 30 years old. The second story. I'm still getting extra money for malicious compliance from my superiors. The third story. My boss said that I don't have enough to do, and I don't do my job well, so I fixed it. And the first story is immediate cell phone prohibition while in uniform. While in the US military, I was an E4, enlisted, not officer. Enlisted ranks go to E9. I was going to meet up with a friend for lunch, but this briefing ran long with an E9, female, who was someone special, like the leader of our entire career group or some such. But these briefings are mandatory and so generic that you tune them out. Probably the third one in a quarter I'd been forced to suffer in silence through. Ironically, this same female E9 had come to my prior base and was coined by her. Coining is a small token of gratitude, a good job in the shape of a coin that you can show off to others, bragging rights. This visit was different. Because female E9 had blathered on, I wanted to alert my friend via text that I'd be late. It was so boring, and the briefing kept getting extended for so long. I guess I practically had a conversation with said friend. Anyway, I caught the negative attention of my superiors. The next day I got written up. In the reprimand, the letter stated, effective immediately, you are no longer allowed to carry your mobile phone. Cue malicious compliance. The moronic idiocy where the punishment far exceeded the crime led to me spending several taxpayer dollars writing an email, outlining the issue with said order. It went something like this. To my E6 supervisor, I received my letter of reprimand stating that I was no longer allowed to have my phone with me while in uniform. Unfortunately, my phone is sitting here with me at my desk. How am I supposed to get my phone to my vehicle given these circumstances? Please advise. The E6 shows up at my desk in a huff and says, take your phone to your car and get back up here. Aye aye. I then had to go visit my immediate E9. Male, different one than the speaker. Why? Not sure. So it's me, E4, E6, and male E9. I explained the situation, but I'm allegedly a problem child for not listening to a person who wouldn't be able to pick me out of a crowd the next day, because I was informing a friend who could that I'd be late for lunch. Whatever. Male E9 asks me if he thinks he should call my parents and inform them of what I did. I think this odd, but I guess some 18-year-olds get really nervous at this threat and plead no, please no, E9, don't do that. Me? I'm 30 by this point, and a college graduate to boot. My response? You're going to do whatever it is you're going to do, very matter-of-factly. This notably annoys male E9. E9, what's your parents' number? Me, I don't know. You don't know? Don't you call your parents? Well, yes, but they moved recently, and I just have their numbers stored in my phone. Well, pull it out and look it up in your phone. My gaze immediately shoots at E6, who just as swiftly lets out a very audible sigh as he realizes my phone is in my car. Sir, I was ordered to no longer have my phone on me while I'm in uniform. I respond, I'm told to go retrieve it from my car and provide my parents' phone number to the E9 for, safekeeping. A year passes and I tell my dad the story, after I've separated. He never got a call, but said that if he had, he would have asked whether the phone call was a joke, given that I was very much an adult by then. Edit. Yes, there are a wide variety of reasons why you'd be low ranking and an older than normal. For me, I opted not to gain a rank, for $200 extra per month and getting yelled at even more, and I knew I wasn't going to stay in. By this point, I was within 6 months of getting out. I joined very late, as I had hit hard times, and instead of going back for a master's degree and taking on massive debt, I opted for that path instead. Once getting out, I nearly doubled my income, as it is an in-demand skill set. My low rank no longer mattered to my bank account. I was definitely on the fence. Like, this could be interestingly fun. Let's see where this goes. My dad isn't exactly disrespectful, nor would he make a joke out of the E9, but he likely would have been more upset at the waste of time and dollars. I did say, I'd prefer you not, but you're going to do what you're going to do more than once. He was trying to get a rise out of me. My indifference kinda peeved him off. Edit 2. My circumstances were that I had a solid job, but not in an area where I wanted to be. So I moved halfway across the country to live with a friend. Ended up hurt and jobless. My parents offered to let me come home, which I did. Got a job in the field that I loved, past tense. But I was working every hour of the day, nearly random shifts. 7 months of that and I knew I had to do something to escape. But instead of opting to get a master's degree and a ton of debt, I opted instead to join the military at a very late age. Oh my god, they really think that if they tell your parents will scold a 30-year-old OP? Haha, this is ridiculous. But on the other hand, people are different. I had one guy I supervised, a 28-year-old E3 who behaved worse than many people 10 years younger than him. One time he forgot to salute a passing officer. The officer stopped him and reminded him of decorum and decency. The officer rightfully didn't want to deal with this nonsense, so he contacted the first sergeant, who called me into his office and explained the situation. I went to my squad for what was supposed to be a 5-minute conversation, but he decided to argue with me. I told him that the fight he chose was a dumb hill, because it takes you 2 seconds a day to put your hand up to your face. What could have been a "hey, you screwed up, don't do it again" turned into disciplinary papers, added to his already solid case, just because he wanted to be a pain in the A, over an inconsequential nonsense. The second story is, no one is allowed to leave early anymore, if you say so. So for some context, I work in healthcare. At the moment, I am on-call personnel that has been scheduled in the basic 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. in an outpatient clinic portion of the hospital. We take both walk-ins and scheduled appointments, seeing as many as 80 to 50 patients in a single day, but typically we're done an hour early, around 4 p.m. Currently, my staff team is short 5 people, due to high turnovers and people going off to advance their careers. This is something that is not quite uncommon. Because of this, the managers decided to implement 2 new emergency rules to help with coverage. The first one states that no one could leave early from their shift anymore, regardless if all patients have been completed for the day, as we may be needed elsewhere. Secondly, on some days we must also find our breaks, which can be entirely dependent on how many people called out for the day. Because we're so short-staffed, I've been unable to collect my full 1-hour break, as the shortage is leaving me to run the outpatient department by myself on most days. Thankfully, this had worked to my advantage, and for the last 2 months, I've been getting a lot of OT and extra pay for missing breaks. The benefit of being on-call personnel at my hospital is that we get a 20% higher salary in lieu of benefits, so I'm now making an upwards of an extra $300 to $400 a week. As you can imagine, management began to recognize the pattern and called me into the office last week to see why I'm costing them a fortune in OT and missed breaks. It is easy to tell from the start that the managers are not happy with this, even having the notepad ready to write me up. The director immediately pulls out my timesheet with highlights galore. The entire thing looked like my old college textbooks. A few days in particular caught management's eye, though on the week I made $500 extra for the week. They had pulled camera footage on the back area for 3 shifts, where I was finished an hour early and just hung out at my desk until closing, basically arguing time theft, but also claimed on my timesheet that I had not taken a lunch. Before management could explode on me, I requested they pull up the patient schedule for the day, our personnel schedule for that day, and including the phone records to show that I had called the other management to see if I was needed anywhere else. The rest of the conversation went somewhat similar to this, not exactly verbatim. So if you're done an hour early, why didn't you just take your lunch then? Or float to another department? You mean just leave early? And I had called the other departments those days asking if they needed help. No one did, so I stayed where I was because we weren't allowed to leave early. That is correct. We're not allowing staff to do that at this time. If you're not needed anywhere else, you should be taking that time to catch up on paperwork. All paperwork was done. I had completed orders and referrals in our system for the next week. All are time-stamped for proof. Also, our current contract says we cannot take lunch for the last hour of the shift, but the idea of me taking a lunch in the last hour and leaving early are effectively the same. If you'd like me to not go over into more OT, then allowing me to leave early so I can legally acquire a lunch would greatly help you. After the awkward conversation, I was told that was all they needed and would get back to me. After 3 days, management concluded that the rules still need to be properly enforced due to staffing, and therefore I was completely valid in what I had put in my timesheets. To this day, I'm still acquiring the extra money. I expect to pay off 3 student loans by the end of the year, thanks to the extra income. Feels good. Good malicious compliance, OP. They've probably figured out that paying you a little more is still cheaper than hiring more employees. For this reason, OT is going crazy on my job. The new employee needs benefits, extra payroll taxes, training costs, etc. So they just work with us instead. But it's still good for you as well, since now you'll be able to pay off your student loans. When I worked at the call center, we had come in at 9 a.m. sharp. I used to get to work early because my bus to work was at 8. I would come in by 8:30 and start work. I sometimes left half an hour before the end of my shift. No one ever reprimanded me. And then the new manager came in. He didn't like it, so he told me to be on time. I agreed, so I stopped coming in early. Once he asked me to come earlier by half an hour, but I told him, I'm sorry, but my work time starts at 9 o'clock, so I can't come earlier. He was angry, but he wanted me to stick to the schedule. The last story is, doesn't look like you have enough to do. Got my first career job at a city government, keeping tabs on its real estate and the legal documents relating to said real estate. I'm wet behind the ears, as this is my first 40-hour per week job, and I'm just out of college. This was a time when multitasking was a huge buzzword in business, and it seems every single job I applied for required a good multitasker. But I thought that was BS. I worked best when only working on one task at a time and managing my workload via a daily time allotment schedule. That is, I'd schedule my work in 15-minute lumps when I got in the morning and work on those tasks. That way I never missed a deadline or had a project fall between the cracks. I also love to keep my desk clean. All tasks in my physical inbox were sorted and prioritized. The paperwork was then filed and the tasks scheduled for later that day, or later in the week depending on how urgent it was. Consequently, my desk was always empty, save one folder, and a few maps related to the folder. Once one task was done, that folder and its maps were filed. A new folder and maps were retrieved. One afternoon, my direct boss walks in, looks at my desk with one folder and two maps, looks at my clean topped filing cabinets, looks at my empty inbox, physical one you actually put paper and folders in, grunts, walks out. 20 minutes later, my boss stomps back into my office, drops 18 inches of folders and papers onto my inbox, states proudly and firmly, "It doesn't look like you have enough to do, so here," smiles maliciously and walks back to his cluttered office. It was busy work, 3 weeks of busy paperwork. But did I ever learn my lesson? 1 week after the dump, I realized it was the appearance of working that mattered, so I started saving old files, old maps, and old legal documents. I rebound up papers that normally would be tossed into legitimate-looking folders. 3 weeks later, I had a desk full of no less than 10 stacks of folders, each varying in height from 2 to 10 inches. I had a whole area of my desk covered in rocks and rolls of old maps that I never used, placed in such a way that if you messed with them, there was a good chance half of the stack would fall on the floor. Every day, right after scheduling my real work, I would shuffle the fake folders and paper around my desk and work area. My inbox always had papers and folders in it. Its depths would vary daily, and I kept track of where the real bottom was. Months later, I had folders stacked on top of the filing cabinets, folders stacked on the floor. 18 of those stupid white boxes with files in them in various locations around my work area. My office looked utterly cluttered. But in all that chaos, I always kept one area of my desk clean, the spot where the real work happened. 2 months after the dump, my boss peeked into my office, the door bumping into a stack of 3 full white boxes placed behind it. He looked around, paused, then asked, "What are you working on?" I rattled off 3 of the highest priority properties on my schedule and the tasks for each. "All right, I'll give this to someone else then," and walked on down the hall. I'd already completed those tasks. I hate bad managers. They're in charge of people with responsibilities they don't understand, or are too lazy to keep up with. They're left to resort to superficial nonsense to evaluate individual performance, and this creates such a ridiculous scenario, absolutely destroys morale, and creates an environment in which slackers excel and are often promoted to similar positions, thereby amplifying the effect. If it were any other employee but you, it would lead to the collapse of the company as a whole and would benefit no one. Subscribe, hit the like button, and have a nice day.